Yeah, you gotta put a cover on. Hi, Sheila.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
It's Friday, and that's a good thing. I'm doing well.
Yay!
Hey,
Oh, hi, Irwin. How are you?
thank you, Mary. Saving my whatever.
Saving my whatever. Hi, Lauren and Kathy. Hi, Kendra. Is this first call?
I was on last week, but I was in the car, so I wasn't on camera.
Okay. That works. I don't usually have my camera on. I'm camera shy.
Oh, there it is. I was going to wear this special hat. I'm going to put it on. So this is in honor of my 5-week-old granddaughter.
Oh, wow.
And when she talks, she's going to call me Zaidi.
Why Zaidi?
That's Yiddish for grandfather.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was
so
my gift. That was my gift for from them was that. So decided to wear it.
Aw.
She slept through the night for the first time, and she's 13 pounds after 5 weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
My daughter's not a big woman. Her husband's big.
Gotcha.
So pretty
My
exciting.
kids were around 7, 8 pounds each.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty normal. She came out at
yeah.
10. I'm super excited about taking a deep dive into repeat sales by former customers. That's my
Yeah.
passion.
I can't wait to hear. I usually
Nice.
give people till about 5 after to pop on
Hey, Kristen.
and share. Oh, just anybody who's interested. I finally got out the report for all the feedback from the different vendors, not from the vendors, from the customers of the vendors, and what they had to say. And it's on the website, which is new website, CMA Weekly. It's in the top bar for the vendor survey. So you can go there and find it if you're interested. I did a report kind of consolidating all the comments from each of the different customers, like the vendor customers. And I'll just say that I'm not a professional at building these reports and doing market research. So it's maybe not as perfect as somebody else might do, but I put in a lot of effort. So there's that. And we had 176 people, I think, participate in close, I think around 280, like different recommendations, ratings, because some people use two. All right, well, we have Irwin today, and he's going to talk about repeat customer sales and what he did at Forrester. And we'll just give another minute for people to pop on. Hi, Maria and Emily and Christine and Kathy and Lauren and Caroline. Also on the CMA Weekly website, we're going to start up masterminds, monthly masterminds of all different topics again. And I think I have 8 of those topics listed with their dates. So you're going to basically enroll in the course, which it's not a course, it's just an easy way to maintain the events and everything. And then once you enroll, you can go to it'll take you to the right page to add each of the events to your calendar. So I'm hoping this is a good way to help people get together and still kind of have the events page up. So go ahead and look at that and give me ideas. Kristen, your son was 9 pounds and 14 ounces. Wow. Mine was 9 pounds, 8 ounces. And he came out, he was so bruised. He's 18 now, but he was so bruised from being so big and getting stuck that I was like, oh, oh, I don't want to take pictures. Like he's all purple and stuff. I did take pictures, because I was going to want to remember later on, but the poor baby. Um, yeah, he wasn't at his best looking at the moment.
My first was
Okay.
8 pounds, 1 ounce. My daughter was 8 pounds, 1 ounce. And I'm only 5'6". I'm not like a huge person.
Ah, okay. I'm 5'5", so pretty close. And my first was 7'9". So when I went to the next one 2 years later and he was 9 pounds, 8 ounces, I was like, what the heck happened here? Um, but
Yep.
I think I had a little bit of gestational diabetes that they didn't catch.
Mm.
But the last two, because I have four boys, they went fine.
And
I stopped it
Mary,
too. I didn't want a 12-pounder. So
Yeah.
if people have questions, do they chat them in or just open forum?
Yeah, you can put them in chat, or
Okay.
if you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand, or you can interrupt. If you
Okay. And
say,
you'll
hey,
you'll keep an eye
Irwin,
on the chat?
yep, I'll keep an
Okay,
eye on the
perfect.
chat.
All right.
And we can go whenever you're ready.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Great. So thank you all. This is exciting. It's a large crowd, and I assume everybody is interested in a repeat sales by former customer contact. The thing that people get confused, they sometimes think I'm talking about former accounts. So you lose an account, how do you bring them back? I'm talking about the individuals who worked at your account who are no longer there. And we'll talk through the sort of the workflow and the process. But let me share my screen. Oops, can you able my screen sharing, Mary?
Yep, I'll do that right now. There you go.
And before I start, any just top of mind questions? I mean, I will probably cover most of it, but just in case.
I
All
don't
right,
think so. I don't see anything in chat. And
it's okay.
can I just categorize this as um, like customer marketing, kind of working on recovering past clients? Is that kind of what it
No, no,
is?
no. It's really when I think about customer marketing, I think about two types of people. There's sort of the advocacy marketers and the demand gen type of marketers. So obviously, there's a
Hmm.
lot of gray, and people end up overlapping. But those are the two major streams of customer marketing. More people are advocacy marketers than they are sort of demand gen marketers. If somebody has life cycle marketing in their title or growth, they're probably more of a demand gen type of person. So, the scenario that we're looking at is uh, you have an account, an employee, of that company has left that company. They no longer have access to your technology. The account is still an account, but what do you do with that person? So right
Uh,
now, what most companies do is they wait for that person to raise their hands and call them up and say, hey, I'm ready to buy. I landed in a new company. Let's talk about the process.
so this is a little bit like following your advocates in a
Well,
way.
they wouldn't necessarily be advocates. They'd be any person
Yeah,
who has in a sense, a username, password, any
right.
person who has access to your account. Advocates are a special group
Hmm.
and need to be sort of nurtured slightly differently, depending
Yeah,
on what you're trying to accomplish, but it's beyond just advocates.
sure.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
this is the classic life cycle model. And does anybody have a guess and there are 100 versions of this. Does anyone have a guess as to what's missing in this life cycle model?
I don't see anything. I
You
mean, I
don't
see
see
your
Until the
slide, but
title
nothing.
slide, Erwin.
what? You don't see what's missing?
No, I'm just still seeing the title slide.
Ew, okay.
Are you double monitored?
No, single monitored. Is that any
We
better?
see current state. That one is better. Yes.
Okay, all right. I won't do it in a slideshow mode. I'll just leave it in this mode. Um, you got a little hint. So what's missing is that eventually people leave their company and the company will still be an account of yours. They'll find a replacement person, but that person will leave over time. So if you look at the stats, 20, you can expect that 20% of your individual contacts are going to leave their employer this year. So within 5 years, you will have, well, maybe actually a little bit more. Within 6 years, in theory, you would have almost complete turnover of all of your contacts. And depending on the industry, it can be a lot faster. And depending what's happening with the economy, it could be even faster. And we all know, every company I've been at that sold, software, SaaS software, you get a good percentage, hard to give a real number, but a quarter to a third of all new accounts are frankly repeat customers. The person went from one company and joined another. I met a guy at Forrester. He had bought Forrester 6 times. And that's the very first thing he does when he joins a new company, is he buys Forrester's product. And like I said at the beginning, sales waits for these warm leads to raise their hands. I mean, these are your best leads, and that they know, who you are, they know what the product does, on a sense that they're not formal advocates, but they'll advocate for bringing your account, your the business into that vendor. So, the theory is there anything that a company can do other than just wait for those warm leads to raise their hands in order to accelerate the deal? So can you move up 6 to 9 months when a person's going to buy? So here are the steps. And can you see this slide? I just want to make sure we're in good shape. Good. Thanks, Christine. So the first step is, how do you identify those former customers? Well, you might argue, well, CSMs, that's their job to tell us when somebody leaves. And they might do that with like the main point of contact of the account. But when they get deeper into the personas, I think about 4 different types of personas. There's that main point of contact. There's the admin, or the very, very active user. They're in there, in your product monthly. Then there's the active user. They're in there in the past 90 days. And then there's the inactive user. They may not have logged in the past 90 days. And that first group is more likely to be kept an eye on, whereas the second, third, and fourth groups, obviously lower importance. If somebody's never logged in, probably not the best, the best repeat customer. And you can probably figure out about 40% of them through your own internal systems, whether that's bounce back emails or manually. A CSM or an account manager will tell you this person leaves. But there's a lot of people, bounce back doesn't work for everybody. Not all companies send bounce backs if the person's left. And so you can find about 60% of those people manually. And then there's a whole 40%, which we can talk about technology a little bit later, to find the rest. And then there's the, the segmentation of the leads themselves. And that can be you could segment them a few ways. One is, were they a main point of contact? Were they the admin? Were they an active user or an inactive user? Or, as you get that lead into the system, like, hey, here's a person who's left, you may reach out to the CSM or the account manager, say, can you help me segment this lead as to, were they happy? What was the relationship? Et cetera. But at this stage of the game, we're probably not yet talking to sales. And the segmentation is probably, those either titles, if they were the summer intern and they logged in every day, probably not the best lead. So, you'd have to look at what makes sense for you to segment those leads. And then there's the workflow of getting that information over to let's say the BDR team, or it could be the account team. So one of the things you need to do is you see, well, have they landed yet or have they not landed? If they haven't landed, then that's not a lead yet because they haven't, they're not ready to buy, they haven't landed. I would argue that they should still be nurtured, and we could talk about how do you nurture those people who haven't left yet. And based upon your segmentation, and if the person has landed, then you would send that over to the BDR team to accept or reject, the same way they accept or reject leads coming from demand gen. Now you may look at it and say, well, I know our ideal customer profile. We don't sell to government. This person landed at government. Let me not send that to the BDRs because we know that they're going to reject that lead anyway. But more often than not, you would just send the leads to the people. This is where the person lives because they may need to route that geographically. And this is the person's new title, and this is the person's new company. And you can get all that out of LinkedIn. And that can be done manually, unless you've got hundreds of thousands of customers or contacts and 2,000 of them leave every month. if you got 50, 60 people transitioning in a given month, that's manageable to keep track of just by going to LinkedIn, every day or once a week. Then there's the nurture. There needs to be a new nurture flow created for the person, because if you just send them the prospect nurture, they're going to get a little confused. Like, why are you treating me like I've never heard about your company? I know all about your company. So you may need to create a few different nurtures, maybe one for the main point of contact, maybe one for the admin, maybe one for a VP, maybe one for a manager. That's each company needs to figure that out and see, how complex they want to do that. And then I'm generally not a huge believer in incentives around sales. But for this, I'm actually a huge believer. There is probably something that your company has. For example, you do an annual conference and it costs $1,000 and it's in New York City. Invite the person to it with a free ticket. Or you have a community. Well, they've been kicked off because they're no longer a user. Invite them into the community. So I think, better than a $25, gift card, but is there anything that your company can offer them that will make them feel like they're still part of that, of the organization? And I think that's the same of those people who haven't landed yet. It might be slightly different incentives that you might offer, but how do you keep that dialogue going? And then I mentioned technology solutions for that, for the 40% you can't manage on your own. There are tools out there: User Gems, Boomerang, Champify. There's some tools that you can do. You can do it on your own, self-service, and we could talk more about that. The problem with those companies, the downside is that they only sign annual license deals, and it's probably too early in the game to go to a technology solution. If you can find 60%, that's not bad, to sort of manually prove the point and see if this works before you start bringing in technology. If you bring in technology, it'll probably take you 6 to 9 months to get one of these repeat sales by former customer programs off the ground. If you were to do a pilot, which is what I recommend, you can get that done in 60 days. So I'm going to stop here because I just talked about a lot about sort of the workflow. Any questions or comments? And how might this, relate to your, or, could you see this working at your organization? Okay.
No questions?
Okay. So this is,
I don't see any in chat either.
okay. So this is what we did at Forrester. So the interesting thing is that it all started where we had a board of directors meeting, and somebody from the board went to the head of customer success and say, "Don't we have a alumni program?" Is what he, what he called it. But repeat sales by former customer. Alumni is sort of an easy word to give it a short version of it. Don't we have an alumni program? Why don't you? So the head of CS came to me and said, don't we have an alumni program? It's like, no, let me write it up. So I wrote it up. This is what it would look like. Some of the same slides, frankly, that you saw. And then we had a new VP of sales come on board. So, you lose 6 months. And then new VP sales came on board. And I proposed it again, and they said, "No, we're not ready for that yet." And then, revenues, should start hitting the fan with revenue, which is why, they've had a bunch of layoffs. And it's like, what can we do to bring customers in? So I said, hey, what about that alumni program I proposed twice? Yeah, let's do it. So literally in 60 days, we got this as a pilot. So there was no technology integrations, because that really would have slowed us down to have, the nurture campaign go into Salesforce, and the email get automatically sent out of Salesforce. And yeah, that's the perfect world. But before people start building things, you want to prove that it'll work. So we had identified, as the numbers there, 200 people who had left in the past 90 days. I mean, we found people who, it was shocking, that was in our database that left their company 3 years ago and had 2 other employers since then. But the ones that we really, we accepted, in a sense, I accepted and said, okay, that's the past 90 days it was, sorry, that had left their company. Half of them landed a new company. The other half we tracked in Salesforce Navigator. So as somebody would land, we would be notified, and then that lead would get sent over. So we never nurtured those people because we didn't get that far, but we at least kept an eye on them for when they landed. And then half of those leads were accepted by the BDR team. So of the 200, 50 of them were accepted. And I told everybody, it's going to be 6 months before we close the first deal. So just be patient. But we closed 2 deals, $40,000, $50,000 deals in the first 60 days. And there was one, $150,000 deal that was deep into the pipeline. At that point, I left, and I have no idea what's happened since then. I assume that company signed the deal, but we were able to show that just by reaching out to people, you could accelerate that deal. Now, again, would that person have bought? Probably, but they weren't going to buy within those 60, in the 60 days of the pilot. We knew that because no one had talked to them. The other side benefit of an alumni program, since these folks are former users of your product, is there will be quicker onboarding, and obviously quicker onboarding equals, time to value. So that's a nice little benefit, is, that part of that. Questions on the math? And so I think you could actually probably use this as a waterfall math. So, let's say, for example, I mean, I have it, but I didn't show it here. Let's say you have 10,000 contacts in your database, and if 20% of them leave, that's 2,000. Half of them land, that's 1,000. Half of them are accepted, that's 500. So now you have 500 really good leads. If 10% of those close, that's 50, the waterfall math would say 50 new accounts, one a week, would be signed up. And I think that's sort of back in the napkin, but I think is actually probably not that far off from reality. Okay.
We do have one question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I had this all animated, so I wasn't going to show you everything in advance, but you get to see everything up front. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sheila says this is great. I said I love the data that you were sharing. Kyle says, was there a time frame you looked at when targeting former customers? Did you look at within a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, etc.?
Well, we anybody who left their company within the past 90 days, those were our ideal customers. Anyone who left and landed within the past 90 days. So just because they left, and if they landed on day one, if they landed on day 90, probably not the right time to reach out to them. So we wanted them in their seat for 90 days so that they could get at least acclimated. First 30 days is probably way too early to try to sell somebody that they're just figuring out who their colleagues are and how to get things done. So that was the time frame that we did. But I think those could be tweaked, and you could play with those a little bit. Yeah. Does that answer the question, Kyle? Is that what you were?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Because I was thinking about like customers that may, like, for instance, I'm in higher education. So I know a lot of our customers tend to churn, or our users churn a lot, like because they're going from one institution to the other. So, it's just me trying to figure out like how long are you giving them that space to land before you start reaching out?
Yeah, and I think that's a a subspecies, higher ed, and you might say, well, in higher ed we should do it a lot faster. Now, obviously, if they went to a institution, they already use your platform, then there's a different conversation depending on your business model. If it's a seat model, it's yes, somebody should be reaching out to them and saying, hey, did you know? Here's an example where you probably would contact them quicker if they landed at a company that already has your product, and let's say you had a seat model, or even if you didn't, I would call them literally in day one and saying, hey, we saw you landed, and just we have that. You may not have figured it out yet, but our product is in your institution already. So I think there's some subtleties along the way, depending upon just the product you sell, and the nature of the product, the nature of the audience.
I'd also comment that if I've done this before with customers who were a part of our advocacy program, who have already, maybe they were a speaker, did something, so we had like a relationship already. We would reach out right away, either with just an email or a card, even just a message on LinkedIn that just said congratulations, and there was no, you know, buy our product, or there was nothing salesy to it. It was more just a congratulations on your new role, keep in touch type of a thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of where how you would treat an advocate different. You might not send them into your, just hand them off as a lead to the BDR. You might, if you're the sort of gatekeeper keeping an eye on this, it's like, no, the advocates, we're not going to just send that over. Let me talk to them a little bit, but before we send them over. So I think that's a great example.
I was also going to say, similar to that, we just had an experience where a customer or a person left and is now working somewhere else that's also our customer. And we got an awesome quote from him about how excited he is to still have us as part of his tool stack. So there might be opportunities there. I mean, there's no immediate revenue impact to us, but we have now this great quote, and we know how much he is excited to work with us. So he's somebody we'll kind of keep following.
Now, did you use that quote internally within the company, or you used it externally?
So he actually put it on social media, like unprompted.
Oh, even better.
He wrote about it on LinkedIn, which is even better because now it's,
And I'm curious, did you send let's say you have 5 or 6 users at the account, did you send them that social media post saying, hey, congratulations? That's fantastic.
And I think should actually double check if it happened, but we'll probably send him something.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. So when this is really for a pilot, so let's say you've got the license to, you've got my slides and you want to show it to your manager or the CMO, and we've been, or you've heard some rumblings about it, and you're willing to sort of expend a little bit of your political capital to sort of float this in front of a few people. I might not start with the CMO. I might start with some salespeople initially. But here are the considerations to just launching a pilot. I think if you propose a pilot, people are going to be a lot less afraid, and they'll tell you all the reasons why it won't work. But let's try this out for 6 months and see what happens. And frankly, now's a great time because if it be built into next year's, it can become permanent next year. So one is in the pilot. Do you set revenue goals? I would argue against that. I mean, because that's what a pilot's all about. We're trying to learn, and if you think you're going to make $1 million off of your very first repeat sales by former customer program, then everyone's going to be disappointed. Even if sales says they need $1 million, it's like, let's not set goals. Do you want the stakeholders are in alignment? Absolutely. And there were 2 types of stakeholders. There's the people you needed to get done. So, legal, they need to, be aware of it. The demand gen team, the BDR team. And then there are people who should know about it, but you're not asking them for permission. And that's the Salesforce team. Because eventually, if this goes well, people go, or your CRM team, I shouldn't just say Salesforce, your CRM team, your security team, if this is going to go from pilot to real, then they should be aware of what you're doing. You're not asking them for anything at this point, but know that this is coming. So if the organization does decide to make this an ongoing program, they can't say, well, we didn't hear about this. Our pipeline of activity is a year long, and we'll get to it in a year. It's like, no, remember we sat down 6 months ago, told you all about it, and you said, well, here are the pros and here are the cons. Well, we tried it out. So, they're in a racing model. They would be, the informed people.
Irwin?
Yep.
Colleen Reedy asked, would you limit to 90 days for the next alumni campaign?
No, I think it's up to some of it depends upon the numbers. If the numbers are small, the 7 people from the past 90 days, then I would expand it to 6 months or even 9 months.
Thank you.
I think that's where it depends. You got to look at your own situation and see what makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
The 90 days are the warmest leads because they just joined, they remember your product, etc. Okay. So automation, I would stay away from that because that will slow you down. I mean, yes, it'd be great if you click one button and then all the prospect and all the nurture campaigns go out and all that, but that would take a long time to pull off in any organization, and you want to do a pilot quickly to as a proof of concept. With bringing in technology, that's a maybe. I think that depends upon the numbers. If you've got 20, 30, 50, 100,000 contacts, then for the pilot, you might want to bring in technology like a user gems, a boomerang, whatever, so that you can find those 40% that you can't find manually. And if you had the technology, there'd be a lot less pressure on people to find those folks manually. Incentives, I talked about there earlier, is yes, I would strongly consider incentives. And then, my other passion is, would you assess the health of the customer database? So that's something I would do before. This is part of the argument I would make, as I would look at the customer database, frankly, either working with me or on your own. And I would go through that customer database. I would pick, I mean, it's a little onerous, but I would probably pick about 500 names. And it's manual, and I know it's rough. I'd pick about 500 names, an equal mix from each of those four personas I talked about: the main point of contact, the admin, highly active, active, and the inactive user. And I would see, okay, how many of them are still at their company? And that's part of the argument, because if you could say, I looked at 500 people and 20% of them are no longer, we think they're still at their company, but 20% of them are no longer at the company, that will raise eyebrows very quickly. It'll raise eyebrows around the health of the database. That's a separate issue, but it'll say there are people who actually leave. And let's look at some of these titles. Oh my God, there are all these VPs who have left. And if you were to clean up the database, then you could get the new titles as well, because oftentimes when somebody leaves director, then they move to become a VP. So these folks that you think were directors and are not decision makers have gone to a new company and are VP. And to me, that's your ideal prospect, is the VP at your ideal customer profile. So there is an argument to do an assessment of the database before you even start this, because it'll give you some data to put in front of people. And that is essentially my last slide. I know I throw a lot at people quickly because I'm super passionate about it and get excited and talk fast. But what I think the way to, unless you know your company well enough, and people have been asking for this, but if you're trying to from a customer marketing perspective, show value from a revenue perspective. I mean, we brought in theory, about $200,000 in 60 days. So, if it's really important for you to show value in an economic, basis, and you're willing to expend some capital, then you could, potentially start proposing it. And, frankly, this is what I do for companies. So in 60 days, I can get that program up and running. Again, no automations, but getting all the right people in the room to have everyone agree, this is what we're going to do it. This is what the nurture campaign is going to look like, and let's start keeping track of these people. And I think you'll be shocked how many former customer contacts you have in your database.
So for your nurture campaigns for this, are you building specific sequences for these particular segments? And then how often are you doing your touch points?
Yeah, at that point I spent a lot of time with the BDRs to understand, how they nurture, the new, any lead they accept, how do they nurture them today? Because in theory they know what, or they should know what works and what doesn't work. And we did sort of follow, the content was different. I wrote the text for them, but they were the ones who decided, well, let's send out a note on day one, and let's follow up on day 7, and let's follow up with a phone call, because that was their process, and they felt that process worked. So I wasn't going to tell them, how to do their business. So we just followed and that lowers the friction. It's like, just do what you already do today, from a nurture perspective, and let's stick with that, and let me write the content for you. And then, they could edit it, they could change it, but at least, I gave it to them thinking about, because a lot of people don't know how to talk to customers. They know how to talk to prospects, particularly my friends in marketing generally don't know how to talk to customers as well as they do prospects. So you gotta think about it a little bit differently.
You do. Wow, this was really good, Irwin. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think that, as you said, doing this within 60 days, you were able to generate 200,000. That's great for any company that's really trying to help with, I think it would still fall under expansion, wouldn't it? Or no, it would fall
Well,
under
it's really new
sales
logo.
support.
It's new logo.
New logo. Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
And and the thing that I saw, I mean, what my plan was at Forrester was to be the catalyst, build it, and then get out of, once it gets automated, then get out of the way. This is not something that, this is not something that new headcount is needed. All the pieces of the puzzle are there already. Think about it. There's a salesperson. There's legal. There's those people do that part of it. There's salespeople who know how to sell new logos. There's BDRs who know how to reach out to customers. So all the pieces of the puzzle are there. Customer marketing was the catalyst, made it happen. And if we had gone to full automation, then I frankly would step back and just watch the reports over time and just be available as an advisor, or look at that and say, well, maybe we should try things differently. How do we nurture those people who haven't left yet? And it's obviously a lower priority. But once that got up and running, then we would have worked on the people who hadn't left. So at the end of the day, this is a huge win for someone in customer marketing because it shows value, but you're not trying to add, well, I need 3 people in my team to do it. It's like, no, there's already a team that knows how to do this, and we're just making it happen. I did chat with a lot of salespeople before even starting to offer it because I asked them, well, what do you do today? It's like, well, if I know the person's left and let's say they're geographic, their territories are geographic, then I wouldn't tell anybody and I would give them a month or two and I'd reach out to them. Everyone became their own former customer program. Or if they left my region, I wouldn't tell anybody. Like, well, why am I helping? Why am I helping anyone else out? I mean, I was a salesperson. I know that mentality. So people just held on to their own leads, and they would nurture them how they felt was being nurtured. But there was no programmatic. There was no data, other than people said, yeah, we do know. You probably can figure out. You probably can get a gut sense from maybe sales ops or somebody as to, hey, what percentage of our new logos are actually repeat business? Salespeople probably know that better. And it'd be there's probably nowhere you can run a report in your CRM to find that out. But I think anecdotally, if people know what that answer is, nobody wants to admit it because you don't want to admit that you want to show people like I can bring all these new logos in without any help. But the reality is, my bet is people would say, yeah, about 25% of my new logo contracts are people who've bought from us before. And that's I think a key piece of data that would help make that argument.
Hey, Irwin, like maybe 3 jobs ago, there was something like this, similar to not as sophisticated as what you're doing, but I distinctly recall customer contact left, went to another company, then marketing got wind of it, outreach to that, and then the salesperson who owned that account that the person left from, like, just wasn't even dealing with it.
Right.
Outreach to that non-customer, like former customer contact, and they're like, hey, I was going to contact you in a few more months, but let's talk now.
Yeah.
Fast forward, they closed the deal. It was like 650,000. This was a managed services offering, so different than like a software or a hardware offering. And then the sales rep said, hey, you got any more of those leads? And I was laughing because, like, yeah, of course you want those really great warm leads. So
Yeah.
just an example of it working and being impactful. So thanks for sharing what you've done.
Yeah, and what's really what I'm shocked by is how few companies do this. I mean, I'm really, literally, I found 2
No one does.
companies that do this. Nobody does it. It just seems like such a no-brainer because there's no headcount. If you bring technology in, there's going to be some cost. All the pieces of the puzzle are in place, and in 9 out of 10 companies, yeah, we just wait for that person to call us. I mean, that's frankly unacceptable. If I was a VP of sales, that would be unacceptable. If I was a CEO, that would be very
I've
unacceptable.
seen sales reps say, oh, that person left. Oh, yeah, I know they left, but they never tell anyone that
Right.
person left,
Yeah.
and it's out of their patch. So
Yeah.
they don't care. It's in a different industry. They don't cover. They don't care. They don't tell their coworker,
Yeah.
hey, I have this hot lead over here, this former happy customer.
Yeah. I mean, us in customer advocacy do care because if one of your advocates left, you definitely want to maintain that relationship with them, just as a human, if nothing else. But if they do land, they're very likely to become an advocate again. But that's for them to become an advocate, not for them to buy. Awesome. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I'll jump in. So you mentioned, Erwin, that, customer marketing, it's either on the, advocacy side or on the kind of demand side. And so for those of us who've been firmly on the advocacy side, proposing something like this, I could see as a real value add. I could see it becoming a real turf war between demand gen, installed base marketing, as opposed to more like a retention life cycle kind of thing that is becoming more like customer marketing. So um, I'd be curious, for,
Yeah.
advocacy brings it up, but it doesn't get executed by advocacy. How does that, work?
Yeah, I think that's where the pilot is perfect, is, let me run the pilot, and because I'll pay attention to it. Let's not distract people from their day job. Let me make that pilot happen. Now, obviously, it's time. I mean, it's not insignificant, the amount of time, uh, particularly during that 60 days, because you got to sort of line up all the pieces of the puzzle. Um, but and then what I've said to people is, look, this is not the permanent responsibility of customer marketing, customer advocacy. This should get handed off once we just, if it goes well, then let's hand it off to whoever's the right people to hand it off to. It could be sales ops, it could be demand gen. Whoever wants it can take it. I'm not trying to build an empire here, but trying to add value. And this is such a no-brainer. Like, why aren't we doing this? So even if it gets taken away, then at least you get credit for being the person who was the catalyst. I would argue that it makes sense to play to be deeply involved in that pilot. How do you capture the names? What happens when you get the name? Because then it's getting done. Because if it's demand gen doing it, no offense to demand gen, it's like, well, we have this big campaign that's going out, so we had to push it off 3 weeks. Oh, we got this, there's all the excuses. I hate
Or
to
they
use that
just
word.
feed them
Yeah.
into another big campaign. And like you said,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
getting emails that are like they've never been a
Yeah.
customer,
Yeah.
before.
And people in customer marketing, even if you're not a demand gen person, you've got all the tools in your head to know how to do this. It's just turning advocacy a little bit on its side, because you know how to communicate with customers.
Yeah, I like the alumni idea. I mean, even from an advocacy perspective, an alumni advocate, or we've had that with like the MVP, kind of tech ambassadors, kind of a thing, as far as alumni. So I like thinking of it that way too.
Yeah, that's what we call people. I don't know if
Internal.
we called it to them to their like in an email. I don't. We
Yeah.
may have said, I think in the emails, I'm trying to remember, we did send something about, it's like, join the alumni program. And in Forrester's case, we gave them 90 days of access to Forrester content. So we had something really valuable to give them.
Yeah.
And so you have that special alumni license. Um, so you could spin that when you have software, if you're HubSpot, giving somebody 90 days of access to HubSpot doesn't really help them, because that doesn't help them. But giving them a free ticket to Inbound in Boston, or something else, or you can still come to our user group meetings, and we'll keep you, we'll let you know when they're happening in your city. Like, what do you have that can be an incentive for them just to keep that relationship going? And what I say is, like, just because you left your company doesn't mean the relationship has to end.
I'm curious if you've done any of that with people who maybe haven't landed yet. Maybe not the free access to the reports, because I don't know how useful that would be, but I'm imagining if you're looking for a job and somebody says, here's a free ticket to Inbound, like that's pretty cool. And sometimes I think we have, as an industry, we ask, everywhere, we need your business email, we need your business email. And when you're looking, it's like, well, but I still want to be a part of the community, or I still want to learn. So I'm
Right.
curious if you've done anything under sort of the guise of, well, eventually this person's going to land.
Yeah, we haven't. Let me just take a note. I want to talk about Gmail for 1 second. We didn't get that far because that was going to be the next fit. Once the program got accepted, then I was going to start handing things off to people, and then I was going to build the program for the people who hadn't landed yet. But you raise a really good point. I was talking to this company, about a month ago, and they said that when people first sign up, they get their, they sign up with their Gmail address. When they in that nurture process. When they become a customer, we update their email to their company email, and we lose their Gmail. And I was saying, ooh, that's painful, because it would be really great if you could keep their Gmail address, because when they think about when they leave, right now, the best you can do is probably send them an in-mail. Because just because you don't know their personal address. But if you kept, that'd be something I would recommend to folks is keep both fields, their personal and their corporate email. So when they leave, you can reach out to them very easily through their personal email. I mean, most Salesforce admins or CRM admins will say, no, we can't do that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to have two fields for email addresses. People get confused. I understand all that, but I think if you've got a product where it's that you start with freemium, that really holding on to their Gmail addresses somehow or other would be very valuable down the road. A lot of times when people, a more enterprise product, they never give you their personal email address. But even companies that demand a company email. I understand why in your lead gen you want the company email, not the personal email. But there is an argument saying, give us your personal email, and then if they want more, then it's like, well, we need your company email now. Now you've got both. So down the road conversation to have. I wouldn't lead with that in talking to people, but it's very valuable.
I'd have to agree. I think it's helpful to have a Gmail account, because especially with how often people do switch jobs in the technology world. Does anyone else
And
have?
one other thing about technology. So some companies will have Zoom Info. Some companies will have Apollo. I'm a little more familiar with Zoom Info than Apollo, but I believe they sort of do the same thing. And that's one of the pushbacks you'll hear from folks very quickly is, oh, we have Zoom Info. We know when people left. The problem with Zoom Info is that information lags because they don't scrape LinkedIn, like the user gems of the world and boomerangs of the world, Champify, they scrape LinkedIn. So when that person updates their profile, it's getting updated. Zoom Info doesn't. And I remember doing because somebody said to me, well, we don't need another tool. Zoom Info does all that for us. I said, okay. I picked 500 names. I went through, I looked at Zoom Info and LinkedIn. So Zoom Info was I gave them the list, they automated to it. So a third of the people out of the 500 were a perfect match to what was in LinkedIn. A third of the people were okay, not great, but at least they've landed a new company. You don't really know what their title is. And a third of the people were so far off, it was like, this is where they were 3 years ago. This is what Zoom Info is telling me. This isn't a dig on Zoom Info. It's just a dig on databases. The database told me, or the service we use, they've had 3 jobs since then, and you're telling me they still work for so-and-so, and they've updated their LinkedIn profile. So the scraping of the LinkedIn is really the way to go, because you don't want to wait 6 months to identify that person who's no longer your that former contact, that former customer contact. You want to know when they update their LinkedIn profile that they've now landed. Now, not everyone updates their LinkedIn profile. Not everyone says that they've left, but that's where some of the more manual processes, like bounce back or CSMs telling you that they've left. So none of this is perfect. There are going to be some people that do slip through the cracks, but you're going to minimize that number. Christina, you had a question?
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to make a comment. LinkedIn started offering this functionality via LinkedIn Navigator. So now they have a filter that will give you this list. And I try to run a campaign like what you're advocating for now. The challenge that I ended up with was that we got a sales team. The way that the data flows is like if whatever contact was associated with an opportunity, And yeah, and it's not one, and the person that bought it, was part of 6, 7 people that actually ended up using it. So my pool ended up being so small, and now I'm looking into, and you're also inspiring what if we go back to all of the churn that we had last year in advocates and contacts, and we go in and manually look at every opportunity and see if there's more people we could associate in that account to expand that pool a little bit more.
Yeah, Sales Navigator. I mean, at one point, someone's like, "Oh, that's the holy grail, or when that does it for you." It really doesn't, because it's each individual say it's it's first of all, it's not, and then there's Sales Navigator Advanced Plus that you really need to do this. It gets pretty complicated, and it's each individual salesperson still running their own show. It's not like there's one person who can sort of look at the entire database. So Navigator is not, you know, you would need to integrate into Salesforce, and that's going to slow you down, because that's a long life cycle to get the Salesforce team to integrate Navigator into there. So there are some downsides. I was at one point, I got really excited by it when Advanced Plus, I think they called it, came out. I was like, no, it doesn't really do what you want, or when it helps the individual salesperson, but doesn't let you run a campaign.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
what do you suggest again then? Not Zoom Info, not Sales Navigator.
Well, I think
What?
the LinkedIn scrapers, and that is not meant as a derogatory term, but the companies that that will scrape LinkedIn for you. Now you've got to sign an annual contract. As a just a commercial for what I do, I can, with I work with one of the vendors, and I can do a one-time cleanup. So if you were to give me 10,000 names or 5,000 names, all we need is first name, last name, and company. Don't even need email address. I can, very quickly, with them, run a report. It's a one-off. There's a fee, but we're talking about pennies per name. If you're doing manually, it's dollars per name, and they'll do a one-off for any of the people I work with. If you call them directly, they say no, you need to sign an annual license, and you can't justify $40,000 as an annual license, to do that. Now, the scrapers they'll say, well, give me 200 names, we'll do that for you. They'll do that as a proof of concept, but they're not going to take your entire database and do it for you, because then you don't need them anymore. So, if you want to look at your database or a subset of your database, then I've got a partner who will do that.
Perfect. Any other questions for Irwin today about his alumni program? Um, Feel free to jump in. We have a few more minutes. Otherwise, he's on LinkedIn and in the community, the CMA Wakely Slack community.
One other thing, I just finished this, and I'm vetting the information, so I wouldn't take this to the bank right now. But somebody, Jeff Ernst from Slap 5 challenged me. We were at a networking session. He said, Erwin, do you know what the economic impact is of bad customer data? Because I can tell, I can say, I can tell, there's a reputation, let's say a company wants to send out a crisis communications email to their main point of contacts, but they don't have their database set up for main point of contacts. And they end up sending this crisis information to everybody because they can't segment their audience. That's a hit to the organization. So, you can look at different departments. What's the impact of bad data for each department? Because it's not just customer marketing problems. It's, legal has an issue, field marketing, inviting people to an event in London, but they live in Boston, because you think they're in London. So there's a lot of impact across the organization. But he said, what's the economic impact? So I started running some numbers, and I came up with 5.8% of ACV. But then I realized that bad data is like retail theft. You can never get it down to zero, and the cost of getting your theft, if you're Walmart, down to zero is just too high. You're going to alienate your customers, and it's just going to be too expensive. So you build in 5-10%, is going to get lost walking out the door, and you just know that. Same thing with bad data. You're not going to ever get to 100%. So I took that 5%, 5.8% number, and narrow it down to 2.8. So my contention is I'm having somebody who's like a financial planning and analyst person who really knows this stuff to do an analysis of my numbers. But there's clearly an impact to bad data, and I'm saying it's about 2.8% of your ACV could be impacted by bad data.
Wow, that's very
So
helpful.
more to come. There'll be something published on this, hopefully in the next week or two. But that's part of that. And one of the things with bad data is that repeat sales. If you think people are still at your still customers, but they've left, there's an opportunity there that's being missed.
Yeah.
And you let's say a company has 10 users and 4 of them are no longer with the company. You need to find some replacement users because there's going to be a renewal impact in 6 months because there's only 5 people using your product now instead of 10, 6 months ago. So there's that issue as well. So this, cleaning up the database benefits a lot of parts of the organization.
It does. It definitely does. And I think, dirty data is a problem with a lot of companies. So I'm glad you're out there working on it and helping.
I'm happy, Leslie, I'm happy to do a database health assessment. So it's free, 10 questions, and then a half-hour phone call. I don't need any names of your database. It's more of a conversation. And I'm looking to do 30 of them this summer. And then I will write a report as to this is what we heard from 30 companies as we assess the quality of their customer contact database. So, I create a PowerPoint deck with your current state, what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, what you can fix on your own, what you may need to outsource to fix. So if anybody's interested in doing a free database health assessment, just reach out to me, or you can go to repetitos.com to just, read about it. And, if you need to involve other people, I'm happy to work with them. But I think it's one of those things that you probably can do, your manager should know, but I don't think you need to inform everybody across the organization. And it could be like, well, that was great, but we can file that away, or wow, that's really useful, and let me start moving it up the food chain within your organization. So I'd be happy to do that, and I would love to do that because it's part of the research side of what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Irwin, for
Thank you.
jumping on today and helping us with showing us this alumni program and talking about data and how impactful this can be. And I'm sure this is going to be a very popular recording once I get it up today. I'm sorry, I have children in the background, and I will get this recording up because it is done. If anybody wants to save the chat, you usually can down there in the bottom somewhere. Actually, I don't see it right now. So there it is.
I'll send everybody that new report when it comes out on the
Sure.
the economic
Yeah.
impact to bad customer data.
Yeah, we can put it in the newsletter and on
Oh.
the Slack. And
Yeah.
next week, I believe we have Angela Ferrante from Laudable coming just to share some ideas about how she's using AI because she uses it so much, so often. And I'm always interested in listening to her creativity on this topic. And yeah, Champion's our sponsor, so check them out if you haven't yet. And then we will see you next week. Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mary. Thank you all.
Bye.